Hello and welcome to On the Record, a debate-style television talk show where Bahamians will find the balanced, true and open debate they've been looking for. Election Day, January 10th, 1967. At the close of the polls, the incumbent United Bahamian Party, UBP, and the opposition Progressive Liberal Party, PLP, both polled 18 seats each. Two other seats belonging to Labour Representative Randall Fox and independent candidate Alvin Brennan. By the following day, both Fox and Brennan agreed to throw their support behind the PLP in a coalition-style government. Fox would become the first Minister of Labour, Brennan Speaker of the House. The balance of power had shifted from the minority UBP to the majority party of the citizenry, the PLP. 52 years later, we mark this day with an official holiday and recognition of one of the most significant occurrences in the history of the Bahamas. Happy New Year and welcome to Season 3 of On the Record. Tonight we are discussing majority rule 52 years later, and what have we learned? I have two powerhouse guests who will provide some great insight into where we've come since 1967. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Our discussion begins on the other side of this break.
On the Record is brought to you by Alive, the nation's newest and best LTE network.
Good to be alive.
Golf, and it was a great way for us to get out on Saturday morning. When I moved home in 2014, coming from the U.S., I was so accustomed to being on my phone, 24/7. And so when the unlimited package, was introduced with Alive, I was crazy excited. For me, with chatting with all of the parents and the students and such like that, my phone is my life. And so being free to be out here on the golf course, use my data, and not have any worries, it feels like I'm back in the U.S. again. So it's awesome, awesome service.
Hi, I'm here to tell you about the fastest way to purchase the vehicle you want right from home.
With SBT Japan, we import used cars from Japan straight to you.
Car ownership doesn't have to be hard. Go to sbtjapan.com and sign up for free. Search for the car you want, place your order, and make a payment using any one of our convenient payment options. Once you pay the duty and tax to our in-house broker, we will clear the vehicle and even deliver it straight to your home. Sounds too easy? Well, shouldn't it be?
And welcome back. The authors of Islanders in the Stream refer to the period of 1963 to 1973 like this. No other 10-year period in Bahamian history saw so much economic, political, and social changes as that which began with the Bay Street's last election victory and ended in the achievement of Bahamian independence under the all-black PLP government. One of the more significant events of that decade was the attainment of majority rule. Tonight, we take a look at where we have come since the events of that day. My guests tonight really need no introduction or little introduction. Former Governor General Sir Arthur Foulkes and former Minister Sir Charles Carter. Both of these men have illustrious careers as journalists and broadcaster respectively, politicians and historians. Gentlemen, welcome to On the Record.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is an honor for us to have you in here tonight. I referred to you at the top of the show as two powerhouse guests tonight who have come to talk to us about a significant event. I want to first of all begin by putting this whole January 10th, 1967, as we call it now, the date of majority rule, but putting that into context. At the top of the show, even before we came on air, just a few moments ago, we talked about this was almost a forgotten day for a long time. It seemed as if people stopped talking about it for a period of time, or there was only a small group that seemed to remember it. But nowadays, what has changed? Why all this emphasis, it seems to be, again, on Majority Rule Day?
I'm not sure there is a great interest. I mean,
Or maybe it's just us.
You may be a little bit ahead of me in that. It is very important, and these are not just symbols. These are steps in the direction of nationhood, steps in the direction of good governance, steps in the direction of good people. And that's why you celebrate them, because they become aspects of heroes that we can send on to the next generation and hopefully improve what's happening today. So the country is still evolving, but not the excitement that it has before, but it is evolving, and hopefully it will integrate itself with the great ideals that came out of the early generation of the Progressive Liberal Party. Everything was there to make people good citizens and appreciate what the government should be doing with a good country. That lesson is there. Unfortunately, it's not repeated as often as it used to be.
For my generation and even those behind me, there is still that disconnect, Arthur. I mean, we know what it is, maybe from our civics classes, but there's not, as Sir Joel said, there's not that excitement.
I know, and it's a pity, because I regard January 10th on Majority Rule as perhaps the greatest event in our history since emancipation. It was that important. Unfortunately, I think it became very politicized, and up to this day, some people do not fully understand the significance of it and what it did for our society. And I got to pay tribute to my friend, Reverend C.B. Moss, who has been hammering away. He's like John the Baptist in the wilderness.
The voice.
And having his services. But I think it's beginning to change, and I think the fact that we made it a holiday may have helped with that. And I gather now generally, there's still not enough interest, and in our history in general, really. But I gather that there are some young people who are really keen, Sir Charles, to know more. I talk from time to time with young people from the university, what used to be COB, and when they hear things, they say, I didn't know that. And they were delighted and they want to know more. And it's our generation, we have to educate them. And we have not done that well, I'm afraid.
Take us back to what it was like pre-January 10th, 67. What was it like to be a young black Bahamian in the Bahamas, or a young Bahamian living in the Bahamas?
I was ecstatic. And I was ecstatic because I was going to school in New York. I'm a very fortunate Bahamian. I admit that. I lived in New York. I went to school, high school, Rhodes School, where many Bahamians went in New York. And then I went on to NYU. And I came home for this one summer. And rather than sort of swim it away, Dad said, no, you're going down to the Bahamas Federation of Labor. Your uncle is there, okay? And that's when I really got to know Sir Randall Fawkes. He's an interesting character. I always found him excessively interesting, and always doing something very, very quickly, and always knowing that he could do things better than most people. But most importantly, he was able to bring people together and to help us to get rid of some of the wounds that were preventing us from becoming a great democracy. So during that particular period, I felt enriched because I got to see all the people who came there for counseling. I got to see the people who he counseled with for strategy, and I got to see the purpose of this country moving forward.
People, I think, don't oftentimes forget or don't realize the importance the labor movement played in that period. I mean, you had the ruling UBP, you had this opposition now, PLP, that was growing in strength and support and challenging at every election prior to this. And apparently, even in the 62 election, there was a thought that the PLP would win. But then you always had the labor movement. I don't even think if it was an undercurrent, but you had a very strong labor movement led by men like Sir Randall Fox.
In fact, the strike in 1958,
Yes.
I believe, was a really great awakening. And because the strike demonstrated for the first time that the majority of Bahamians who are second-class citizens can work together. And I think Bahamians shocked themselves, and they certainly shocked the colonial office. Because they looked at us as a peaceful little colony, nothing happens there.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden there's a general strike.
Led by the labor movement?
Led by the labor movement. But it took on more than just a strike about labor. The people were expressing their general discontent with the whole system. Because as you asked earlier, it's difficult for young people today to grasp the kind of country we had at the time. The country was controlled by a classic oligarchy. And we call it a democracy, but it really wasn't a democracy. In 62, for instance.
It was the haves and the have-nots. All right. We were the have-nots.
In 1962, the PLP got, so I remember that, PLP got 32,000, I think, 500 something votes, and elected 8 members. The UBP got 26,200 some votes and elected 18 members.
So I'd explain to people how that happened and how the system was set up so that you could get less votes and more seats.
Yeah, not just less, I mean, plenty less.
It's even beyond gerrymandering.
Yeah. You have to invent a new name for that. The electoral system was corrupt, top to bottom. It had always been. Going back to the 40s, 50s, when they had, I don't know what to call it, when people bought votes openly.
Yes.
And you heard about the torn £5 notes and all these things, and the moving of the Armada. Elections were on different days, so the boys moved from island to island, and they came in with their boats and flour and rice and everything.
And the torn £5 vote, you tear the note and you get the other half. You give the person a half.
If he wins.
And if you win, if the person wins, you get the other half.
It's clever because I was guaranteed that you would vote for him. But socially, the majority of people in the country, at 85% black Bahamians, were seriously disadvantaged and were in fact second-class citizens. Because if you live in a country where there's 85% of the population is of one color, and when you look at the House of Assembly, the government, is just the opposite. That on the face of it, there's something wrong with that. Now, that's not normal. But more than that, black Bahamians were denied a lot of things we regard today as privileges. Access to business. Well, first of all, we had to deal with the overt discrimination in public places. The majority of the public, we couldn't go to the Savoy Theatre, we couldn't go to the British Colonial Hotel, we couldn't go to Grand Central Restaurant. That changed, the discrimination in public places changed in 1956. When Setian moved his anti-discrimination resolution. But the other things that remain barriers to black Bahamians stayed in place. And one of the most significant and damaging was access to education. that is why all of us back then hammered that point so.
I want you to hold that point because I do want to talk about sort of the education in the Bahamas post 67 and the emphasis that was placed on that. But what do you think really did it for? What was the undoing of the UBP 67 election? Because people talk about winning elections, but you always look at the incumbent, and in many instances, it's the undoing of the incumbent party that many times leads to the victory for the opposition. But what would you say?
A significant part of that, was the women got the right to vote in 1962, and many people, I think, at that time, including myself, thought that would make the biggest difference in the whole wide world. And there were some outstanding women who forced themselves on the right to vote. And that happened in 62. And it was only the beginning, but it was a significant beginning. And it made 67 stand up like the wonderful time that it was and moved on. So there's a couple things happening there very, very quickly. And it made all the difference to the Bahamas going forward. So the country needed another twist to get to 67. And thank God that happened.
But not everybody supported. You've got at the close of election day, 1967, you've got the PLP and the UBP in an 18-seat deadlock. Each party with 18 seats. The two outstanding, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, Sir Randall and Alvin Brennan. And obviously those two were to throw their support behind the PLP for this majority rule to happen. But it would seem that given all of the circumstances of the time, there would be overwhelming support for the PLP, but there was not.
Yes, and very significant point. We, on the night of January 10th, we knew we had won. And to our minds, there was no question about Sir Randall. I know Sir Randall was a very clever man, and he said he gave us the government.
He always has it.
Gave us the government.
That's Uncle Randall.
But each of us gave us the government.
Yeah, sure.
And so it was inconceivable that Sir Randall would have supported the UBP. Inconceivable. Yeah. Now, Brennan had somewhere to go. Brennan had a decision, because he was not committed to the movement.
Yeah.
And we realized that night, even before Randall made his announcement, that we had won. Because we knew he went through his motions with the union, but we knew how that would end up.
Right.
But we had won. But the problem was, you would be surprised to know how the inferiority thing was ingrained in so many of us. And this is why after the 62 election, I left the Tribune to start a newspaper, Bahamian Times. Because I realized, as Sir Lyndon said, it wasn't the shackles on our feet, it was the shackles on our minds.
Right.
And there were a lot of people, black people, who really believed that black people couldn't govern. And that is the mentality that we had to tackle. This is the mentality we had to change. And we had to explain that yes, black people can govern as well as white people, and unfortunately, just as badly too. We're humans,
That newspaper that you edited was perhaps one of the best things that ever happened in the Bahamas, because it gave an objective view of the country to begin with. It also gave a view that made sense. And it told the stories of Bahamians who were able to and were helping to move the country forward for all of us. They moved forward with a democracy, but it came from being informed. And I tell you, that will always be, I think, the most outstanding thing to get us to majority rule.
And there were some people who, we took this approach. The Bahamian Times would be a political journal. We would be tabloid in format, but not in content. We didn't go for all the flamboyant stuff like Sir Charles said. We wrote serious journalism. And there were some people who said, oh, that's not going to work.
Oh boy.
But we were astonished at the people who lined up every Saturday to pick up the paper because they were yearning to hear these things and to read these things.
Gentlemen, we are at the point of a break in our show. This is obviously a very fascinating discussion. We will continue with our show right after this quick break.
Hi, I'm here to tell you about the fastest way to purchase the vehicle you want right from home.
With SBT Japan, we import used cars from Japan straight to you.
Car ownership doesn't have to be hard. Go to sbtjapan.com and sign up for free. Search for the car you want, place your order, and make a payment using any one of our convenient payment options. Once you pay the duty and tax to our in-house broker, we will clear the vehicle and even deliver it straight to your home. Sounds too easy? Well, shouldn't it be?
Every time I'm in the Bahamas, I use Rev Go Play.
Yo.
Wait, Omar coming? Boy, this Rev Go Play? Solid.
Rev, you and us together.
This portion of On the Record is brought to you by Generali Insurance Company Limited, your employee benefits specialists.
This new year marks season 3 of On the Record, and this broadcast tonight marks the anniversary of majority rule in the Bahamas. Islanders in the Stream writes, the first PLP budget greatly increased expenditures for education and health, leaving the allocation to the Ministry of Tourism strongly in third position. My guests tonight, Arthur Folks and Sir Charles Carter. What was it like now for a new young government, young men and women, to now have the reins of power in the Bahamas? We, up to this point, had been run by white men, the UBP party, but now you have a group of young black Bahamians who have now control of the country. First of all, what was the feeling of the people? Because I'm sure there must have been a lot of uncertainty and fear as to what would happen, and certainly for those men and some women who were in power now.
The most important thing is they voted PLP. And that vote was a historic, positive jump to the future. And they believed in their representatives. They could see, mind you, along the way, all the pathway to independence, the riot that took place, the general strike that took place. There were very interesting steps to independence, and they were all on display. And at the end of the day, we finally got 1968, okay? And that was the beginning of, I think, a new country, a new people, and a new nation.
Yes, I think 1968 demonstrated, 1968 set aside all those fears, because you're right, there were people who were uncertain, even some of those who voted for us. I remember my good friend Moses Davis, who was who campaigned with me in the East in '62. You remember Moses Davis? He's a wonderful man, passed on. And he used to stammer a bit, and he says, Arthur, we're going to do this even if we go down. I said, no, Moses, it's not about going down, we're going up. There were some people who said we're going to do it anyhow. We convinced a lot of people that it was the right thing, and we, as we were talking earlier, we concentrated a lot on our history because our people were ignorant of our history, of African history, the history of black people in general. This is what Bahamian Times did. But still, there was that residual fear. But the government, the first PLP government did so well in that 1 year that in 1968 it was a flood of support.
So just to put it in context, 67 win, shortly thereafter you would have had the death of Uriah McPhee.
Right.
And then Premier Pinling decided to call a snap election. And the PLP won overwhelmingly. in that snap election, which I guess would have been a litmus test and even a referendum on the PLP government. And
Yes,
you saw then the increase and the real support now.
Because a lot of things were done. I remember in the Family Islands, for instance, Warren Lavarity was, what was his nomenclature? Then they called it Minister Out Island Affairs. Out Island Affairs, yeah.
That's right.
And he got things done in the Family Islands. The people were happy. Things long neglected. Cecil Wallace Whitfield was Minister of Works for that first year. And over the hill, all those little corners between East Street and Market Street that were cul-de-sacs, dead ends, they were all straightened out. All those dark corners that were never lighted, they were all electrified.
Baintown came
a lot of things.
It was beautiful.
Parks were put in,
Beautiful.
playgrounds for the kids.
That's right.
In that 1 year.
Yeah.
And so it was demonstrated. The sky is not going to fall. As a matter of fact, this is looking pretty good.
There was also this almost aggressive approach to Bahamianization. Some historians say maybe a little bit too aggressive, but why was that so necessary to push this policy of Bahamianization and things Bahamian, and now Bahamianizing a lot of institutions that were already in existence and even the ones that were about to come on stream?
Yeah, go ahead.
This was a part of the same syndrome I described earlier. The fight against this inferiority.
Yeah.
And this was fed by a lot of foreign people who came here. And unfortunately, it exists, and not so many today, but still, you'll find occasionally a foreigner will come and he thinks he's coming to some outback where the natives, he's got a certain view of the natives. And so that is why that was so important. We had to demonstrate that Bahamians were capable. Now, we realized we had a lot of work to do to educate, but then that was opened up too. Education. That's why I said earlier that was so important. When I went to school back in the 40s at Western Senior, which is now C.R. Walker, most of us had to leave school at the age of 14. I left school at the age of 15. Only a few every year were able to go to government high school. Every year they selected just a few. The rest of us had to leave.
Yeah.
We couldn't get secondary education, much less tertiary education, and then fewer yet were able to go off to school, to university, and that has changed, even though with all the problems that we have in education today, and we have big problems in education, still, we have come a long way, because we have thousands of Bahamians with master's degrees, with professional degrees. We have Bahamians with doctorates. We even have Rhodes Scholars.
Oh, yeah.
So we've come along.
How did that emphasis on education though really begin to change the narrative?
But it changed the narrative because suddenly all Bahamians were buying into the notion that we could exceed. I mean, it's as simple as that. Not only that, we talk about the government high school, and Dad used to talk about what they paid to go into government high school during that particular period. But very shortly after that, in the first decade of the PLP, you began to see these secondary schools begin to pick up. All right, but more importantly, in my recollection, I begin to think about all the great teachers who came back and came in during that particular period. My goodness gracious. Many of the schools today are named after some of them, but we had some of the most devoted people helping to create a better Bahamas during the 70s, 80s, and 90s than I have ever seen in my entire life. I mean, we just came alive. Even the theaters that we used to produce came alive. Suddenly Bahamians felt that they could do anything. Suddenly we got the government to help the better ones of us to go away to school. And they agreed to come back to the Bahamas. I mean, that was part of it. Suddenly, Bahamians began to flourish like only Bahamians can. I always say, Sidney Poitier is a good actor, but come home, they're all over the place.
That is true. In the opening statement, I referenced the first PLP budget emphasizing education, health, tourism. Looking at it now, it doesn't seem like a lot has changed. It still seems that successive governments still continue to put the emphasis on these areas in terms of the allocations, but at least two of them are still very much deficient. I mean, you talked about the problems we still face in education, and you need only open the newspaper on any particular day, look at the issues that we're still having in healthcare. What happened? If we started out with such a running start, particularly with education, and then this emphasis on health and healthcare and delivery of healthcare, I mean, if you want to set aside tourism, that's done very well. That's the big success story. But if you look at these two areas, we have still, in some instances, not found our way, or we've lost our way, maybe in some instances. And what would have happened, and when do you think that would have started, or what would have led to some of the erosion that we see now, even today, in education and especially in healthcare?
I can't explain it, but I think it's unfortunate that more modern generations of Bahamians took what they could from the Bahamas, and so many of them went away and never came back. That was in the second phase. The first phase of Bahamians that I lauded a little while ago were people who were chauvinistic about our country and wanted to ensure that other Bahamians got the kind of advantage that they had. But now, much later, I'm not so up to date on things nowadays, but I began to see a slowdown. A different kind of Bahamian came about, almost a Bahamian who expected things to happen for them rather than making them happen for themselves. And I still think that we need to bring a sense of this is yours to all Bahamians, so they could feel about this country the way we at our generation feel about this country. There's no other place. I mean, honestly, there's no other place than the Bahamas. And in my view, there could never be. And we've got to continue to try and keep the qualities alive that made Bahamians want to become something so that they could make the country something.
The honeymoon didn't last very long with the PLP, and within the PLP, and even with groups of Bahamians, it started to come apart relatively early. I want you, Sotha, to take us back to when that started, why, what led to that?
Well, now we're going to get into partisan politics.
Well, I think that's an important part, because the history books, make note of that the honeymoon did not last very long.
No. Some of us, again, let me make this point. Majority rule belongs to all of us.
Yes.
Yeah. More than half of those who were elected in 1967 became disaffected and formed a new organization called the Free National Movement. More than half. 8 one time, and then they were followed later on by Ed Moxie, Carl Francis, and then some others. But I think what went wrong, the movement succeeded, I believe, because of the strong sense of collegiality that we had during the struggle. We were like brothers. Sir Charles talked about Bahamian Times. So sorry, let me tell you, people gathered there, not just to get the people to talk. It was like a ongoing symposium. And we used to meet at different homes. On Saturday, we'd go to Sir Lyndon's house on on Soldier Road, boiled fish and talk. We were close, campaigned together. But after 67, from my point of view, the collegiality thing dissipated, and that was the beginning of the problem.
You'd achieved the goal.
Yeah, and that was unfortunate because some of us had some contributions, I think, to make that were never made, and that was very unfortunate. But still, the original dream, the original aspiration, still I believe remains amongst a lot of us. But the short answer is that the lack of collegiality. There was a movement that grew up around Sir Lyndon. I call it a cult of the personality. And one thing led to another, and we had the split. On reflection, that was a difficult thing. It was certainly difficult for me. I had invested a lot in this movement. But when you look back, you know, history has a strange way. It was probably a good thing. It was probably a good thing because the old guard, they were on the way out.
That's right.
They were finished.
And in many cases, standing in the way.
Exactly.
And by old guard, you mean the UBP?
The UBP. Yes. And I think Norman Solomon recognized
as
it.
the opposition at the time.
Yeah, as anything. As a viable political party in the Bahamas, the way they were organized. I think Norman Solomon said, they're like, how do you put it? Like, 1 foot on a banana peel, 1 foot in the grave, and another foot on a banana peel. So what we did, even though it was painful and it was not anticipated and all the rest of that, it was good because then we had a two-party system.
Which is helpful and needed in a democracy.
Exactly.
But, Sir Charles, the majority stayed with the PLP and continued to support Sir Lyndon and the PLP for many, many years, yourself included. What was it that endeared Bahamians to the PLP and this dream for so long and for so many years? And despite everything that came, that support continued.
And it's called loyalty, because when you look at where we came from and when we began to look at where we had arrived, there was a gap. There's no question there was a gap. There were opportunities here now, all right? And bright kids could take advantage of it. A lot of us who went into business even profited from that. And it became a different kind of place. But now, but take it further, it becomes very, very difficult to keep some momentums going without new blood and with a new way of getting things done and a way of sharing it with more people and making the country a better place. It just does the good. You gotta, that good. It's not always good news, all right, and that's what it is, There
are also some growing pains that you talked about why certain problems. Yeah. There are also some growing pains that comes with a development of a country like ours. When I was going to school as I mentioned earlier, the population of the Bahamas, I think, was around 60,000 in the 40s. Over that period, and that's not been a very long period for me as an old man, but in terms of history, that's a long period. Now we are what? We're heading for 400,000 people. There's been that rapid increase in population and rapid change. And remember, the Princess Margaret Hospital used to be called the Bahamas General Hospital. I get so amused when I hear people today talk about socialized medicine and all this argument. The point is that we always had a National Health Service. It was called the Princess Margaret. It was called the Bahamas General Hospital. Yes. No Bahamians were turned away.
Even then?
Even then. But it was financed out of the general revenue.
That is right.
Obviously, that was with the massive explosion of population that has become and has been for some time unsustainable. So something else has to be done.
Gentlemen, we are at the point of another break. You are watching On the Record. We are back right after this quick break.
In the past, I've had a lot of issues with service, data service, drop calls. I was encouraged by a very close friend of mine to make the switch, and in doing so, my service has been impeccable. The data is very fast, it doesn't spool, it doesn't take long to load, so everything works beautifully. I like to know what my bills are, and it's important that I'm able to simply just pick up my phone and know what my bill is. The front line for the Valley Boys is comprised of about 200 members. It's very important because to be a successful leader, I need to be able to efficiently and consistently communicate with them. It works that way. It's beautiful. The data that you guys provide is flawless. I'm John Williams, chairman of the Frontline Dancers Association of the Valley Boys, and I believe in best.
Hi, I'm here to tell you about the fastest way to purchase the vehicle you want right from home.
With SBT Japan, we import used cars from Japan straight to you.
Car ownership doesn't have to be hard. Go to sbtjapan.com and sign up for free. Search for the car you want, place your order, and make a payment using any one of our convenient payment options. Once you pay the duty and tax to our in-house broker, we will clear the vehicle and even deliver it straight to your home. Sounds too easy? Well, shouldn't it be?
December 1st, 1966, Premier Roland Simonette announces that general elections would be brought forward to January 10th, 1967. The UBP had hoped that by calling the elections so early, it would catch the opposition unprepared, and the electorate would be distracted by the festivities of the holidays. Today, we're talking about January 10th, an historic election that changed the political landscape of the Bahamas forever. My guests are Arthur Folks and Sir Charles Carter. In the run-up to the 67 election, which I just described, the UBP clearly made some missteps and miscalculations. There was the controversial redistribution of the boundaries, allegations of conflict of interest and corruption, particularly over the granting of some casino licenses, and even the calling of the election so soon after the holidays. Now, today's politicians, listening to all of this, we seem to be in a perpetual cycle, because you listen to this and you think, well, where have I heard this before? It seems that even today, the politician of today still continues to make some of these missteps and not calculating the response of the electorate or how engaged people are, any number of things. It seems that in many instances we're still at the same point.
I'm not sure we're still at the same point, but boy, we're still not missing the same steps that we made before,
yeah.
You know, or falling or bucking up over them. January 10th, let me tell you, it was a wonderful time to be alive. There was no question about just to see that happen, to see this country come to life, all right, and to be a part of it. And that's what I remember most about it myself when I think back, is that the participation that I had at that particular time, because I had actually come back to Nassau. I was going to NYU and stayed around and got a job at ZNS and was able to look into what was happening and make reports on what was being said or recorded on the radio and the announcements that were being made and all that sort of thing. And then doing a program at that time called the Top 30 or something like that, and interjecting little hints and things about it. You know, you took chances doing that, because at the end of that, I knew I was going back to NYU. Mm-hmm. And it was a period where I think Bahamians were doing their best to change the country, and they did it, and they should be proud of it. But going forward, I'm not sure that the vision for that has come alive as it ought to have. We don't sit down and talk about it. Nobody talks to me about it anyway, you know. But c'est la vie, such is life. That's where it is.
There was a group of us, Mr. Sawyer, before January 67, in the PLP. We called ourselves the NCPA.
Yeah.
And we recognized then that you had to have special knowledge for to govern. You had to know about the system of government. And what we did, we read, we educated each other, we got books from Britain, with one availability. We educated ourselves about the system. Those from that group, people like Warren Lavarity, Jeff Thompson, others, we knew the system. We were prepared for that. Unfortunately, today, I don't think that a lot of people who are going into politics do not prepare themselves as well. And some, unfortunately, don't even seem to understand how the system is supposed to work.
And they don't even have to send it to England for the books down.
And you have to look at, you refer to the history. I don't think any party will make that mistake again. to have the Christmas holiday right in the middle of the election campaign. And another thing that was an interesting side of that was, Lyndon went to Andros, and the old preacher took out his Bible and referred, I think, to Exodus. I can't remember what chapter it was, and he referred to how the children of Israel were led out of Egypt on the 10th day of the first month, Exodus. And when I heard that, Elo told me about it. We were having a meeting the next evening at the
Southern Recreation.
No, it was in the place where they used to have the boxing. In Centerville.
Yeah, oh boy.
Anyway, we had a meeting there, and for the first time, I used that Exodus name, and that was and that took off. That was fire. So all of that worked against them, but the bottom line is, I would say to young people today, if you're interested in politics, for goodness sake, read, learn about politics, and learn about your system. We do not. We have very little in common with the United States. And too many of us, I fear, not only in politics, but in other things as well, seek to draw parallels between what we have and what they have. The system is entirely different. We have a parliamentary democracy. The Americans have a system that was a constitution that was written by some brilliant men, but it is an 18th century constitution. And if those same men were living today, Adams and Jefferson and the rest of them, they would not write that same constitution for a 21st century country. And don't forget, after the war, when the Americans controlled Japan, they didn't seek to impose that system on the Japanese. What did they do? They gave them a parliamentary democracy, and that is what we have. So we have to learn the rules, we have to learn the philosophy behind a parliamentary democracy, and especially those, all of us should learn it, but especially those who are aspiring to political office.
Interesting. I hope they're listening and I've taken in the message. Did we do a good enough job, and this is for you, Sir Charles, did we do a good enough job in defining what it is to be Bahamian and who are we as Bahamians? Did we do enough? Did we do a good enough job in that decade following 67? I just want to talk about that period first.
Well, I did.
I still do.
And still do. Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, the Bahamian story is one that will astound anybody. I mean, for a country that is so small, you'd be surprised how creative and how brilliant we are.
Absolutely.
We don't know our own capacities.
That I agree with you on.
You know, and it's a bit unfortunate because if you look around the world, you'd be surprised at the number of Bahamians over the last, like I say, the last decades who reflect on their Bahamian upbringing as part of the success that they've had. And there have been many, many of them in every aspect of duty and responsibility that you will have. You will find a Bahamian. And that's what I find interesting about us sometimes. Sometimes we don't appear to like other Bahamians as much as we like ourselves. We don't lift the people to the height that they ought to be a beacon for the people who are behind. I love the Bahamas, and I spent a lot of my life trying to keep a record of the wonderful people that I came across over the last 30 years of Bahamians, the program. I have the archives. I kept it. I love it. I love the Bahamas. I don't believe in destroying the Bahamas. And I hope that before it is ended, I'm able to put it in a way where it could be respectfully listened to and where younger people may learn something from.
We seem to be a different people in many ways. 50 years ago, we seem to have had a greater sense of morality, respect for the church and religion, civility, and even just general respect for each other. We have lost that in so many ways, in our day-to-day interactions, in our discourse, even in our politics. I mean, you know, we've always had dogfights in politics, but it's a lot different nowadays. We seem to have lost that sense of who we are.
Yes, I have described it like this. We, as Sir Charles has said, and Sir Charles, let me tell you, let me congratulate you and thank you for the work you've done in keeping ourselves moving. I said one time that if all we see is American television, we will come to believe that we are them. So what you do, and what people like you do what was what I was going to say?
Our loss of morality and respect.
Yeah. We are doing so well, as we talk just now, in our artistic culture. We're the most talented people in the world. There's no question in my mind about that. When you consider our small population, we have done so well in art and all the arts. Where we are falling down is our social culture. You know, years ago, Sir Charles would remember this, we had some Bahamian musicians busy imitating everything out of the United States.
Absolutely.
Then that changed. Yep. And our musicians started to rediscover Bahamian music.
That's right.
And doing a wonderful job of it.
Yes.
What we have not done, we have not paid sufficient attention to retrieving our social culture. And our social, that's what you're referring to, Mr. Sawyer. Our social culture is in steep decline. And that is our problem. And as I told you just now, we need to see more of ourselves. We need to look not just at our artistic culture, but what we used to be as a people. Foreigners used to come here. I still hear it now and then. Not just for Sanancy. They used to talk about the Bahamian personality. We were so gentle. We were so mannerly. The men would open car doors. Men would say, "Yes, ma'am."
Yes.
No, yes, ma'am. No, sir.
It's called brought-up-see.
Nowadays,
I talk about it all the time.
Nowadays, we address everybody as, "You guys, you guys."
Gentlemen, we are going to take our final break in the show. We'll be back with more On the Record right after this.
Hi, I'm here to tell you about the fastest way to purchase the vehicle you want right from home.
With SBT Japan, we import used cars from Japan straight to you.
Car ownership doesn't have to be hard. Go to sbtjapan.com and sign up for free. Search for the car you want, place your order, and make a payment using any one of our convenient payment options. Once you pay the duty and tax to our in-house broker, we will clear the vehicle and even deliver it straight to your home. Sounds too easy? Well, shouldn't it be?
One America News Network, your leading source for the latest breaking national and international news. With nearly 4 times as many headlines as the other networks. Straight news, no speculation, no opinion, just the facts. Complete coverage 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. One America News Network, your source for credible news.
Welcome. This is our final segment of On the Record tonight. We're looking at where we've come since an election, January 10th, 1967, ushered in majority rule. My guests, Sir Arthur Foulkes and Sir Charles Carter. Gentlemen, How much of an impact do you think this holiday and the introduction of this holiday has made on the recognition of majority rule? We talked about it a little bit at the top of the show, but really the introduction of this holiday, not just sort of a day off where you don't have to go to work, or, well, it's January, so we don't go to the beach in January, but, you know, that this time, what has the introduction of this holiday done, and possibly what could it do to bring more emphasis and focus to this day?
Well, we had a sidebar conversation just now about Bahamians abroad, okay? Or Bahamians who are known internationally. Bahamians who have been able to create a persona or a talent for themselves that is worldwide. Yes, we know about Sidney Poitier, we talked about that earlier, but there's so many other people. And Sir Arthur made an insertion there talking about some very famous Inaguians, okay? I didn't know that anybody from Inago could sing opera, but they got him. He's a Simonette, okay? There were several other people that came in my mind just now when we started to talk about them, who were also very interesting and very popular. But we have, as Bahamians, inherited a number of people who are known world-class and who are world-class and who identify themselves with and continue, in people who write about them or talk about them, in continuing to identify them as Bahamians. And the only Bahamians who don't know that are Bahamians who are here.
So we used to celebrate them more, eh?
Oh, listen, I've got Simonette coming up in a couple of weeks on Bahamians, okay? And there's one more that I think Sir Arthur just mentioned. I also have that particular person as well. You know, and I'll think of it in a second, but our reach has exceeded our grasp. Wow. Bahamians do have capacity, they do have talent, and they have whatever it takes to become world-class. They do it as a rite of passage.
So what should this day mean for us? What should we be doing on this day?
I think we should, with just what we're doing now, we're talking about it and raising the consciousness of our people about it. And that's why I think programs like this are so important. But we have to do more than that. We have to find other ways. You see, when other people celebrate their national holidays, they do things. They have programs. They have plays. They have all sorts of ways. They have parades. This is what we have to do. We have to gradually do more each time we celebrate this holiday. Remember those who participated, and I'm not just talking about those of us who are on the front line.
Yes.
There were some other people,
many people who
made tremendous sacrifices, some of whose names we will never know.
That is right.
Find out about them. The Effie Walks.
That's right.
Wonderful woman.
Gentlemen, final question to both of you. 50 years from now, what would you want to see or hope to see for the Bahamas? 50 years from now, what would you hope that the Bahamas would be like? What would you like to see?
For myself, there is no other place in the world that I like better than the Bahamas. And I'm not just saying that because I was born here, but I've got to know the Bahamas. I was very fortunate in being born in the family, in the community, in the city, in the island, in the archipelago of the Bahamas. It reflects on me. I can't really truly consider myself living anywhere else. I may go someplace else as a visit or even for a medication. But in terms of sitting back and looking around and appreciating what I have it as a Bahamian.
I hope that 50 years from today, this wonderful physical environment that we have will have survived. Because we are under threat today by global warming and pollution, and we should, Bahamians of all people, we should be ardent supporters of anything, all the programs to protect our environment. Because I believe that this environment contributes to who we are as a people. You know, when Columbus came here, the Taínos, the Lucayans, they said it was so gentle, and so they lived an idyllic life, and they were so unused to war. They held out their hands to touch the edge of the sword. They didn't know, right? Maybe all of that contributes to who we are, and also the rich gene pool that we've come from all over to these blessed islands. I hope that we have the environment is kept intact. I hope that we are an educated, cultured people, that we are prosperous people, but an educated, cultured people. Let me put emphasis on the culture. And that we will have discovered again our social culture and bring it into full flower.
Gentlemen, I first of all, I want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing with us tonight. These discussions are so very important to the life of our country and the continued life. Oftentimes, we do not have a full grasp of who we are as a people because we do not know from whence we have come. I thank you for your service to this country. I can truly say that, you know, Mr. Carter, I worked for you for many years at Island FM. I always tell people that was the greatest period in my career working under you, and I thank you for that and what you could. That's all right. You gave me you really helped me along, and I appreciate that. And what you have done to continue to tell the Bahamian story, I thank you for that, and certainly what you have provided to this country is this country can never pay you for that. Sir Arthur, as well, for you, your service, your work in journalism, you know, even ascending to the high office as Governor General, and what you brought to that office, and continue to, even as a statesman. We thank you so very much for your contribution in your life and all that you've given. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
And thank you for the invitation.
My pleasure, my pleasure. Continue to do well. I can tell you, we've got to do this again.
Yeah.
So make sure you'll stick around a little longer. Thank you so very much. We hope that you have enjoyed our show tonight. Special thanks to my guests, Arthur Folks, to Charles Carter, also my producer, technical staff. We look forward to seeing you throughout the year. Once again, I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. We'll see you next time right here on The Record.